Welcome to Monday Momentum. Again, this is our 20-minute space to start the week. No pressure, just think about power. And then today, I think it has a little bit to do with permission, or a lot to do with permission, right? And I think this week, what we're going to talk about is deeply personal to a lot of us, especially if you're a high achiever, or if you're a visionary, or people who care deeply about kind of becoming more. And so we'll be talking about the unfinished masterpiece, giving yourself permission to be. What does that even really mean, right? And I want to say this up front. You don't have to be finished to be worthy, right? You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to keep deciding to show up. And you don't have to have it all together to really take up space. I think we've talked about something similar to this, but I think just based on conversation that I've had with people in the community, right? I think this is something that we should talk about today. And it's this idea, right, that I want to kind of ingrain in your heads and your hearts and your minds, is that you are already an unfinished masterpiece. And that doesn't make you broken, right? It just makes you alive. And you have to use that perspective in how you show up. And there's this notion, right, that we have to be perfect to be able to deliver and to show up. But I think that's false. I don't think, I know that that is false. And today, I really want us to explore the idea of, why we struggle with not being there yet, like why we struggle with showing up even if we're not there yet. And I also want us to think through how to give ourselves permission to be fully human in the process. What does that mean? What does that look like? And then as you think about that, right, as you show up imperfectly, the idea of living with grace while you grow. So as you grow, to not only give others grace, but to also give yourself grace. I think that that's probably what we should talk about. If you have comments, concerns, questions, toss it in the chat, and I'll chat about it after we're done. But there's this silent pressure that we all carry, right? And it's that pressure to be productive all the time, like to keep going, 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 going. It's also that pressure to be polished, so to look pretty, right? We have to have the perfect brand and the perfect body and the perfect business and the perfect belief system, and we have to have it all together. Or we have to be very well put together in order for us to show up on stage, in order for us to show up in our meeting, in order for us to show up at work, in order for us to show up in our lives and our families, right? And I think that that's wrong. But the reason why we think that is because we live in a world that says that if you're not finished, right, or if you're not packaged perfectly, then what you have to say is not valuable. Your input isn't good enough, or if you're still figuring it out, right, you might think, well, I'm behind, right, because all my peers have got it together, or like my coworkers or my colleagues or my competitors or whatever it is, right? They have it together and I'm just still figuring it out. So something must be wrong with me. Again, that is a lie. Because I want you to understand is that those unfinished parts, right? The wherever you are along the journey, because it is a journey, right? You might be at the starting line and somebody might be 100 yards in front of you, whatever that looks like, right? But I want to ask you, what if those unfinished parts are not the problem, right? What if they're actually evidence that you're still in motion, that you're still growing, you're still evolving? I don't want to give you permission today to be a slacker or to accept mediocrity, but I think that the bigger truth is that masterpiece takes time, and that's something that we all want to achieve, but it evolves in layers. So you accomplish this one thing and then you grow, and then you accomplish the next thing and then you grow. And that's what I want to think about. I want you to think about in your life, right? So it's okay to show up even as the masterpiece is being refined, defined, growing, evolving, whatever it is, whatever stage, whatever phase of growth you're in. It's okay to show up like that, because at the end of the day, right, this is a process. You weren't, Rome wasn't built in a day, if you remember that saying, right? So it's a process and you are evolving. And as you think about that, right, I almost want to give you kind of permission to keep evolving and to keep growing. And number one, it begins with a mindset. So that mindset shift that you have to start showing up fully, even if you're still becoming. Like that's a mindset shift, right? And so when I think about that, the first step is we have to redefine what being ready looks like. Most of us, myself including, right? And I'm working on this because I'm a work in progress. Most of us, we want to wait to feel ready before we launch that product, before we get on stage, before we create, before we show up. But ready is just a feeling. That feeling, that ready feeling, it actually comes after we leap, not before. So after we take that first step, and then we speak or we create that thing, or we do, right? Then we become more ready and we continue to perfect it. We continue to create, we continue to evolve to get better. And so I want you to know that you're not late. I'm not late. We're just mid chapter, as we're, and I always talk about that messy middle, but I think that's where we are, right? So I don't want you to disqualify yourself from being in the room because your story is not finished. It looks different. Again, you might be in chapter one, you might even be in the prologue, right? But you're showing up, you're starting, and that's what I want you to think about. So as you think about that permission to redefine what being ready is, I want you to think about where you are in your waiting season, right? What does that look like for you? That's what I want you to take from this redefining era that you're in. And then another thing is to start thinking about replacing perfection with presence. So you don't have to be polished to show up, right? You don't have to be polished to have power, because if you pay attention, right, the most magnetic people that you see and that you know, they're present, they're not perfect. They just show up, they take up space, they're not afraid to be imperfect because they're not obsessed with perfection. They just want to be present, because in them being present, then they can work on themselves, they can fix it, they can iterate, they can make it better, they can refine who they are, whatever it is that they're doing, right? It's in that presence, in the showing up, that they can get to work on a better version of themselves. Remember, I just said that you don't have to be ready for you to take that leap. And this is a clear example of that, right? Show up in the room just as you are. And that's what I mean about that messy middle, right? Talk about your product while it's in that messy middle. Let people see your heart. Let them see who you are, how you're growing. Sometimes it's nice for people to see the beauties, right? But your whole life does not necessarily need to be a highlight reel. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's okay to see the bloopers. And I think for me specifically, this is a big memo for myself, because sometimes I really want things to be perfect, but people actually relate more to the messy middle, to the times that you're vulnerable, the times that you show up even if you're not ready, but you know that you have a big vision, a big mission, a big um, something big in your heart that you want to give to the world, right? And so you show up just as you are. So this week, as we're thinking about, how we're going to take this Monday momentum and like crush our whole week, right? I want you to start thinking about showing up in spaces even as our full selves, right? No mask, no filter, no pretending, just in that messy middle as we're growing. Again, I'm not giving you permission to be mediocre or to do things haphazardly, but I am giving you permission to show up as your messy self, because you are growing, because you're evolving, because you're redefining yourself. And that's what it could look like. And think about that. You could be the person someone else needs to see for them to catapult their own journey. So don't wait for it to be packaged with a pretty bow, pretty purple bow, and presented to the world, because it doesn't need to be that. And then another thing I want you to think about is that to reclaim your right to be incomplete. And that's again kind of what we're talking about, right? You don't need to present that finished product, right? You just need to see yourself as a work of art. Whatever it is that you're doing or creating, right? You are living in it, you're showing up, right? And those unfinished edges, we've started to think about them as bad or shameful, but they're not, right? All they are is just evidence that you're moving, that you're growing. It's really how you're interacting with the world. So this is something that I want to share with you, and I was reflecting on it this weekend. And it's a thought that came to my mind, is that, if God isn't done working on me or working on you, right, then why are we rushing to be done with ourselves? Why do we need to present that perfection to everyone else? And I want you to sit on that this week. Again, it's not to allow you to rest on your laurels, but it's to allow you to sit for a second and realize that I can show up just as I am, knowing that, like, I am working on it, knowing that I am in progress, but I'm still showing up just as I am today. So this week, think about practicing grace. And I talked about that a little bit earlier, not just for others, but for yourself as well. Um, it's okay to take breaks without guilt, right? Rest, you don't have to earn it, right? You can just be like, okay, I've done the work that I need to do. And now it's okay to rest. And so as you think about this week, right? As you think about how you're going to show up, because you're going to show up with your full self, even if it's imperfect. But I want you to maybe say to yourself, I give myself permission to be in the process. I can still achieve magic in the process and in the messy middle. And again, right? I said this before, this is not giving yourself permission to show up just haphazardly, but to know that, like, this process takes time, but you're still showing up no matter what. That's what you're telling yourself, that, like, I do give myself permission to show up in the process, to continue to working. Like, there is magic in that messy middle. So as we kind of wrap up, right, I want you to think about, well, how can I apply this? How can I apply this to my week? I want you, kind of my challenge would be to name one area where you've been really hard on yourself for not being done. And when you name that area, right, maybe this week you show up and you continue working and you continue building, but you don't stop because you're not done, right? And then maybe take an action this week that honors you, exactly honors where you are, not where you think you should be. And maybe you write this on your wall, or like behind you, or I have a wall here that I just put a bunch of post-its on. And maybe you write on a post-it and you say, I'm not behind. I'm just in the middle of my masterpiece. Maybe you write that on a post-it and you post it somewhere. And you remind yourself of that every single day. But I want to leave you with this final thought, kind of processing everything that we talked about and thinking through it, right? You don't owe the world a perfect version of you. You just owe the world to be present. You just have to show up. You just need to show up. And that's what I want to leave you with, right? To give yourself grace to be exactly where you are, but then you have to let that growth be visible, let it be messy, let it be beautiful, and then go from there, right? It's from that area, if it's from that understanding, that you can then move forward, right? You're not unfinished because you're failing. You're unfinished because you're still becoming the best version of you. But you continue to put that out to the world, right? You continue to allow them to show up, to see you just as you are, knowing that, like, you are a work in progress and you're going to continue to refine yourself. So that is all I got for you today. Hope that it was beneficial. Hope you took something from it. But give yourself grace to continue to work in the messy middle, but knowing that the messy middle is not the final product. But you need to get through the messy middle and you need to show people that, right? And in the process of that, you're giving yourself grace to continue to grow, because at the end of the day, we just want to continue to be the best version of ourselves. And maybe we don't get that today. Maybe we don't achieve that today. For some of us, you might just be starting, and for others, you might be at your second lap or just finishing your first. But you give yourself permission to show up every day and to continue to put that out to the world so that they can learn from it, so that they can grow from it as you continue to develop yourself. So go out this week. I hope you crush this week. Have a wonderful week. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you don't toss it in the chat, let's have a conversation in the community and let's continue to grow from there. Okay, on that note, everyone have a wonderful rest of your Monday and rest of your week.